toast," my daughter-in-law, Brittany Wallace, declared, raising her wineglass with that familiar fake smile I knew so well. "To the mother-in-law who pays the bills but will never be a real mother." Her words sliced through the air, sharp as knives. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with scissors. My son, Ethan Wallace, looked down, embarrassed, as the other guests exchanged awkward glances. I remained perfectly still, my napkin folded neatly on my lap, watching Brittany sip her wine as if she'd just delivered the funniest joke in the world. 15 years. 15 long years I had spent supporting this family, paying every bill, every whim, every emergency they could conjure. And there she was, humiliating me in front of everyone as if I were a stranger begging for a meal. I took a deep breath. Without a word, I pulled a golden key from my purse. I placed it gently in the center of the table, next to the paper I had prepared that very morning. The metal clinked against the wood, a sound that echoed with freedom. Ethan saw the key, read the note attached to it, and his face transformed from shame to pure terror. His cheeks went as pale as unlit candle wax. "Mom," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Tell me you didn't do that." But I was already on my feet. My black dress swayed softly as I walked towards the door, leaving behind 15 years of humiliation disguised as familial generosity. Every step I took resonated like a declaration of independence on the hardwood floor. It was the key to their house, the house I had bought, the house that was in my name. And the note I had left was simple, direct, no beating around the bush. "You have 30 days to vacate. The legal papers will arrive tomorrow." Rosalia. I remembered arriving at that house 2 decades ago. I was a 49-year-old widow, heartbroken, but with strong hands. My husband, Robert, had died in an accident, leaving me alone, but with a considerable inheritance and a thriving business. Ethan was barely 24 when he married Brittany, that sweet smiling girl who called me mom and hugged me every time she needed money. At first, everything seemed natural. The newlyweds needed help getting established. I had the means, they had the dreams. I paid the down payment on their first house, a nice 2-story property with a backyard where I imagined my grandchildren would someday play. Then came the new car, because the used one wasn't safe for a growing family. Then the vacation to Europe because they deserved a delayed honeymoon. After that, the credit cards for emergencies that never seemed to get paid off. Brittany had a special knack for making me feel guilty for having money while they didn't. "It must be nice not to worry about bills," she'd say with a theatrical sigh. "I wish we all could have that peace of mind." And like a fool, I'd open my checkbook once more. For years, I became their personal ATM. Every month, I'd transfer $2,500 for their basic expenses. I paid the mortgage, utilities, car insurance, phone bills, even gym memberships. When their children were born, I paid for the hospital, nannies, clothes, and private schools. I once calculated that I had spent over $400,000 in 15 years supporting them, and not once did I receive a sincere thank you. Only expectations, only demands disguised as urgent needs, only fake smiles followed by outstretched hands. The final straw had been that dinner. Brittany had organized a family gathering, supposedly to celebrate my 69th birthday. But from the moment I arrived, I knew something was off. Her friends were there, people I didn't know, and they all looked at me with that mix of pity and superiority that I loathed. Throughout dinner, Brittany had been making subtle comments about older people clinging too tightly to their children and the importance of each generation having its own space. When they served the cake, it wasn't even my favorite flavor. It was chocolate, which I detest, but which she loves. And then came that toast, that moment when my own daughter-in-law decided to humiliate me in front of strangers, turning me into the pathetic benefactor who would never be a real mother to them. But as I walked to my car that night, something had shifted inside me. I was no longer the vulnerable widow who needed to buy love. I was Rosalia Jenkins, a 69-year-old woman who had built an empire from scratch after losing her husband. It was time to remember who I really was. Upon arriving at my apartment that night, I poured myself a glass of red wine and sat by the large window overlooking the city. The lights flickered like earthly stars, reminding me of all the nights I had spent working to build what I had. My reflection in the glass showed a tired, but not defeated, woman. My green eyes still held the spark that had won my late husband's heart and intimidated more than one business competitor. I remembered the first time Ethan brought Brittany home. She was 22, with long, wavy brown hair, and wore an emerald green dress that enhanced her light eyes. "Mom," my son had said with that nervous smile he made when he wanted something important, "I want to introduce you to the woman I'm going to marry." Brittany had approached me with apparent shyness, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "I hope we can be like mother and daughter." How naive I was to believe those words were sincere. The first few years were like a family honeymoon. Brittany called me every day, told me her plans, asked for advice on home decor, recipes, and how to be a good wife. I was delighted to finally have the daughter I never had. My marriage to Robert had been blessed with Ethan, but I had always dreamed of having a girl to teach my feminine secrets to share those intimate conversations that only happen between mothers and daughters. Brittany filled that void for a while. We went shopping together, had lunch at fancy restaurants, shared spa and manicure afternoons. I paid for everything, of course, but I did it willingly because I believed I was investing in a genuine relationship. When she became pregnant with Caroline, my first granddaughter, I was there for every doctor's appointment, buying baby clothes, preparing the nursery with the most expensive furniture I could find. Caroline was born on a rainy Tuesday in April. When the nurse placed her in my arms for the first time, I felt my heart expand to fill my entire chest. That girl had my same green eyes, my family's upturned nose, and when her tiny fingers closed around my index finger, I knew I would do anything to protect her. But things began to change subtly after Caroline's birth. Brittany no longer called me to chat, but only when she needed money for diapers, formula, or new baby clothes. Invitations to lunch became less frequent, and when they happened, they always ended with her mentioning some small financial emergency that needed my help to resolve. When Caroline turned 2, Thomas, my second grandson, arrived, a beautiful boy with his father's dark hair and a mischievous smile that reminded me of Ethan when he was little. With 2 children at home, expenses multiplied, and I continued to cover everything without complaint. Private schools, swimming lessons, piano, ballet for Caroline, soccer for Thomas, family vacations to Disney World, the beaches of Cancun, the theme parks of Orlando. Always me funding, always them enjoying. My son, Ethan, had stopped working 5 years ago. Brittany convinced everyone that he had an innovative entrepreneurial venture that required all his attention, but I never saw concrete results. I only saw a 39-year-old man sleeping late, playing video games while his wife organized lunches with her friends using my money. Brittany's transformation had been gradual, but constant. The shy girl I had known had become a demanding woman, accustomed to living in luxury without working for it. Her expenses had become extravagant, designer handbags that cost more than a teacher's monthly salary, brand-name shoes she wore only once, weekly beauty treatments that added up to thousands of dollars a month, and I kept paying. I remained the silent provider, the generous grandmother, the mother-in-law who never said no. Every time I tried to set boundaries, Brittany had a perfect response. "The children need stability," she'd say, with eyes full of fake tears. "We don't want them to grow up feeling like they're missing something." Or the classic, "Ethan is very stressed with the business. If we add financial worries, he could get sick." Pure manipulation, disguised as family concern. But that night, sitting by my window with the glass of wine in my hands, I finally understood what I had been denying for years. I wasn't part of their family. I was their ATM. They didn't love me. They wanted my money. They didn't respect me. They tolerated me because it was convenient to have me around. Brittany's toast had been the brutal confirmation of what I already knew deep in my heart. To her, I had never been a maternal figure. I was just the rich old woman who paid the bills and who, for some pathetic reason, needed to buy the affection of her own family. That realization should have broken my heart, but instead, it filled me with a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in 15 years, I saw the situation with absolute clarity. I didn't have to continue being the victim of their game. I had the power to change the rules. I got up and went to my desk where I kept all my important documents. I pulled out the deeds to the house where Ethan and Brittany lived, the credit card statements I religiously paid every month, the receipts for the automatic bank transfers I had set up to cover their expenses. Everything was there, in black and white, evidence of 15 years of wasted generosity. But I also had something else. I had the legal power to stop it all. The house was in my name, the credit cards too. The bank accounts from which the money flowed to support them were exclusively mine. Technically, legally, they owned nothing. They had been living off my generosity, not their rights. And generosity, unlike legal obligations, can be withdrawn at any time. I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer, Greg Stevens, a meticulous and discreet man who had handled my legal affairs for over a decade. "Greg," I said when he answered, even though it was almost 10 o'clock at night, "I need you to prepare all the eviction documents for the Maple Street property first thing in the morning, and I also want to cancel all authorizations for the use of my subsidiary credit cards." There was a silence on the other end of the line. "Are you sure, Rosalia? It's a big decision." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I replied, with a calmness that surprised even myself. At 6 o'clock the next morning, I was already dressed and ready to start the most important day in the last 15 years. I put on my pearl gray suit, the one that always made me feel powerful during business meetings, and swept my hair into an elegant bun. In the mirror, I saw the woman I had been before I became the complacent grandmother. Determined, relentless, master of her own destiny. My first call was to the bank. "Good morning. This is Rosalia Jenkins. I need to immediately cancel all scheduled automatic transfers from my main account." The employee asked me to confirm each transaction, $2,500 monthly for Ethan and Brittany's basic expenses. Canceled. $800 for Brittany's car payment. Canceled. $500 for the children's extracurricular activities. Canceled. $300 for the country club membership. Canceled. "Are you sure you want to cancel all these transfers, Ms. Jenkins?" the employee asked with evident concern. "Completely sure," I replied without hesitation. "And I also want you to cancel all additional credit cards associated with my account, those in the name of Ethan Wallace and Brittany Wallace." I heard the rapid typing of her computer. "Understood. The cards will be blocked immediately. Is there anything else I can help you with?" "Yes. I want to change all my account access passwords and set up alerts for any unauthorized access attempts." After finishing with the bank, I called Greg. He had already started preparing the legal documents I had requested the night before. "The eviction papers will be ready this afternoon," he confirmed. "Under state law, you have to give them 30 days' notice, but since they haven't paid rent or utilities, they are technically living there out of your generosity. That gives us more legal leeway." "Perfect," I replied. "I also want you to review all loans or financial commitments they may have acquired using my name as a reference, if there's anything I need to know immediately." My phone started ringing around 10 o'clock in the morning. It was Ethan. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then Brittany called, also going straight to voicemail. After 15 missed calls, I finally decided to answer. "Mom, what's going on?" Ethan yelled into the phone. "Brittany went to the supermarket and her card was rejected. We called the bank and they told us all our accounts have been blocked." "Good morning, Ethan," I replied with a calm that dramatically contrasted with his hysteria. "I hope you slept well in my house." "Your house, Mom? This is our house. We've been living here for 15 years. "A house I bought, that's in my name, and for which you have never paid a single cent," I replied, unflustered. "The eviction documents will arrive this afternoon by messenger. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live." A silence fell that lasted an eternity. I could hear my son's agitated breathing on the other end of the line. "Mom, please, can we talk? I know Brittany went too far last night, but that doesn't mean you have to do this." Went too far? I repeated with a bitter laugh. Ethan, your wife humiliated me in front of strangers after I supported your family for 15 years. But that's not what bothers me the most. What bothers me is that you sat there letting it happen. What bothers me is that not once in all these years did you defend me from her derogatory comments. She didn't mean... Yes, she meant exactly what she said. I interrupted him. And you know it. Everyone knows it. For years, I've been treated like the rich, pathetic relative who needs to buy love because she's lonely. But you know what I discovered last night? I'd rather be alone than be surrounded by people who despise me. I hung up before he could respond. Immediately, it started ringing again, but I silenced it. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I went alone to lunch at my favorite restaurant, that little French cafe downtown where they serve the best quiche Lorraine in the whole state. I asked for a table by the window. I opened a book I had been waiting to read for months and enjoyed a quiet meal, without having to listen to complaints about money, without having to feign interest in Brittany's manufactured dramas, without having to pretend that her children respected me when they had clearly learned from their parents to see me only as a source of funding. The waiter, a young man named Alex, who had served me for years, approached with curiosity. "Ms. Jenkins, I haven't seen you here in a while. How have you been?" "I'm rediscovering myself," I replied with a genuine smile, "and it's amazing how liberating it can be." As I ate, I remembered all the times I had canceled my own plans to accommodate Ethan and Brittany's schedules, how many invitations to social events I had turned down because the family needed me to stay and watch the children, how many trips I had postponed because an emergency always arose that required my immediate financial attention. For example, 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to join a Mediterranean cruise with a group of business friends. It was something I had dreamed of doing for decades, but just before the trip, Brittany had appeared with tears in her eyes, saying that Thomas needed minor surgery and that they didn't have enough health insurance to cover it. Of course, I canceled my vacation and paid the medical expenses. Later, I discovered that the minor surgery had been a simple tonsillectomy that their health insurance would have covered completely. Or last year, when I had finally decided to redecorate my apartment. I had hired an interior designer, chosen new furniture, planned to turn my home into the elegant refuge I had always wanted. But then, Ethan came with an incredible investment opportunity that required $50,000 immediately. As always, I opened my checkbook. The investment opportunity turned out to be a pyramid scheme that lost all the money in 6 months. My furniture remained the same as 10 years ago. It was as if my life had been on pause for a decade and a half, eternally waiting for my family to allow me to live. But that day, sitting in my favorite restaurant, reading my book in peace, I realized that I no longer needed anyone's permission to exist. My phone vibrated with a text message from Brittany. "Rosalia, please, can we talk like adults? The kids don't understand why Grandma is angry. This is affecting them emotionally." Typical of her, using Carolyn and Thomas as emotional shields, making everything about the children when it was really about her parasitic lifestyle. I replied, "The children can visit me whenever they want. You and Ethan have 30 days to move out. It's non-negotiable." Her reply came immediately. "You are a bitter and cruel woman. Ethan was right about you." I read the message and, for the first time in years, burst out laughing in public. People at nearby tables looked at me with curiosity, but I didn't care. There was something deeply liberating about them, finally showing their true colors without disguise or pretense. "Ethan was right about me," I murmured to myself. That meant they had been talking about me behind my back for years, probably laughing at how easy it was to manipulate me, how desperate I was to feel needed. But I was no longer that woman. The woman who was getting up from that cafe table was someone completely different. That afternoon, when I returned to my apartment, I found Ethan waiting for me in the building lobby. He was sitting on one of the leather armchairs in the lobby with his hands between his legs and his head bowed like a punished child. When he saw me enter, he stood up immediately, and for the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, genuine fear. "Mom, please," he began to say as I walked towards the elevators. "We have to talk. This is getting out of control." You're right, I replied without stopping. It got out of control many years ago when you repeatedly allowed your wife to disrespect me while I financed your lifestyle. He followed me to the elevator. I can explain everything. Brittany is stressed. The kids have been difficult. And last night she simply showed me what she really thinks of me. I interrupted him as I pressed the button for the 10th floor. And the saddest part, Ethan, is that you let her do it. Your own son stood by silently while his wife humiliated his mother. The elevator doors opened on my floor, and he followed me down the hall to my door. Mom, please let me in. We can resolve this as a family. I stopped with the key in my hand and turned to look at him. It was strange to see my 39-year-old son pleading like a child. For all these years, I had been so focused on supporting him financially that I had forgotten to teach him to be a responsible man. Family. I repeated the word as if it were the first time I had heard it. Ethan, when was the last time you came to visit me without needing money? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was? When was the last time you defended me when Brittany made one of her venomous comments? He opened his mouth to reply, but no sound came out. I could see in his expression that he was desperately searching his memory for an example that contradicted what I had said, but he couldn't find one. Exactly, I continued. You can't remember a single time because it's never happened. To you, I'm not family. I'm an ATM with feelings. And last night, Brittany made it very clear that you don't even respect those feelings. I opened my apartment door and turned to him one last time. The legal documents will arrive this afternoon. Read them carefully. You have exactly 30 days to find another place to live. After that, I'll call the police if necessary. And what if we don't leave? He asked, with a mix of defiance and desperation in his voice. Then you'll discover what it really means to have a mother who doesn't tolerate disrespect, I replied before closing the door. I poured myself a glass of white wine and sat in my favorite armchair from where I could see the entire city spread out before me. My phone kept ringing, but I had put it on silent. Every time it vibrated, I knew it was another desperate attempt by Ethan and Brittany to make me change my mind. Around 6 o'clock in the evening, my doorman called me to inform me that a messenger had arrived with important documents. Leave them at the concierge desk, I told him. I'll pick them up tomorrow. It was strange to feel such absolute tranquility, while knowing that downstairs my son was probably receiving the eviction papers that would change his life forever. That night, for the first time in years, I had a peaceful dinner. I prepared grilled salmon with asparagus. I opened a bottle of wine I had been saving for a special occasion and put on classical music in the background. I didn't have to listen to anyone complain about the food. I didn't have to mediate childish arguments. I didn't have to feign interest in Brittany's manufactured dramas about her social club friends. It was simply me, my food, my music, and my peace. As I washed the dishes, I remembered a conversation I had had with my late husband Robert a few weeks before his death. We were sitting in the garden of our first house, watching Ethan play soccer in the backyard. He was 14 then and had just argued with us because we wanted him to do his homework before going out with his friends. "Do you think we're spoiling him?" I had asked Robert that afternoon. He had pondered for a moment before replying, "I think love without limits isn't love, Rosalia. It's complicity. If we never teach him that actions have consequences, he'll never learn to respect anything or anyone." At that moment, his words had seemed too harsh. Ethan was our only son, and after 3 miscarriages, he had become our miracle. I wanted to give him everything I hadn't had in my own childhood. I wanted him to feel unconditionally loved, protected, safe. But now, almost 25 years later, I understood what Robert had meant. My limitless love had created a man without responsibilities. My unconditional generosity had raised someone who valued nothing because he had never had to work for it. And the worst part of all was that I had allowed that pattern to extend to his wife and children. Caroline and Thomas, my beloved grandchildren, were growing up with the same mindset. They expected Grandma Rosalia to pay for everything, from their expensive schools to their extravagant vacations, without ever teaching them the value of effort or genuine gratitude. But it was too late to change that. My phone vibrated with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Grandma, it's Caroline. Mom lent me the neighbor's phone because she says we can't use ours. Is it true that you don't love us anymore? Why is Dad crying?" My heart broke. Caroline was only 14, the same age Ethan had been in that conversation with his father in the garden. It wasn't her fault that she had grown up in an environment where Grandma's money was taken for granted. I replied immediately, "My love, of course I love you. I love you and Thomas more than anything in the world, but sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions to teach important lessons. Can you come over tomorrow after school so we can talk?" Her reply came quickly. "Yes, but Mom says we can't go to your house because you're very angry." "Your mom is wrong. My door is always open to you. Tell your dad I'll expect you both tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Just you and Thomas. Your mom and dad and I have adult conversations to resolve first, but you two will always be welcome at your grandma's house." After sending that message, I felt calmer. My grandchildren didn't have to pay for their parents' mistakes, but they needed to understand that actions have consequences, and that respect is not optional in family relationships. That night, I slept better than I had in months. I didn't have nightmares about unpaid bills. I didn't wake up worrying about whether Ethan had found a job. I didn't stay awake calculating how much money I would need to transfer next month to keep my family afloat. For the first time in 15 years, I slept like a free woman. The next day, I woke up feeling as if I had emerged from a 15-year coma. The sun streamed through my bedroom windows with an intensity I hadn't noticed in a long time, and for the first time in years, I didn't check my phone immediately upon opening my eyes. I was in no hurry to see how many missed calls or desperate messages I had received during the night. I prepared a full breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast with homemade strawberry jam, freshly ground coffee, and fresh orange juice. I ate slowly, savoring each bite as I read the newspaper in peace. It was incredible how different things tasted when you didn't have to gulp them down quickly between one financial emergency call and another. Around 10 o'clock in the morning, Greg called me to confirm that the documents had been delivered. "Ethan signed for them last night," he informed me. "He also called me 3 times early this morning, but as you told me, I didn't answer. Do you want me to handle all legal communication through my office?" "Yes, please," I replied. "And Greg, I also want you to prepare my will again. There are going to be significant changes in the distribution of the inheritance." There was a silence on the other end. "Are you sure, Rosalia? These decisions can be irreversible." "I am more sure of this than anything else I have ever done in my life," I told him with a firmness that surprised even myself. After hanging up with Greg, I decided to do something I hadn't done in decades. I called my sister Brenda, who lived in Miami, and with whom I had gradually lost contact during the years of intensive parenting of my parasitic family. "Rosalia?" she answered with evident surprise. "My goodness, it's been so long. How are you?" "How are you, Brenda?" I began, and for the first time in years, I could talk about my life without having to pretend that everything was perfect. I told her the whole story, from the early years of generosity to Brittany's humiliating toast, from the bank transfers to the eviction documents. My sister listened in silence for almost an hour. When I finished, she sighed deeply. "Rosalia, do you know what hurts me most about all this?" she finally asked. "What?" "That all these years, every time I called you, you talked to me as if you were the happiest woman in the world. You told me about family vacations, about the grandchildren's achievements, about how close you were as a family. I even envied you because I thought you had the perfect family, while I, here, single and childless, felt incomplete." Her words hit me like a slap of reality. "I guess I had convinced myself that it was true," I admitted. It was easier to believe I was buying genuine love than to accept that I was being used. "Sister, what you've done isn't cruelty, it's survival, and it was about time." After talking to Brenda, I felt validated in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Someone who had known me since childhood, someone who had nothing to gain or lose from my financial decisions, was telling me that I had done the right thing. At 3:30 in the afternoon, I prepared to receive Caroline and Thomas. I bought their favorite cookies, prepared hot chocolate, and tidied up the living room to make them feel comfortable. Whatever conversation we were going to have, I wanted my grandchildren to know that my love for them had not changed. They arrived precisely at 4 o'clock, accompanied by Ethan, who looked as if he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were red, his clothes wrinkled, and he had that defeated expression I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, and Robert had punished him for breaking a window playing ball at home. "Mom," he began to say, but I stopped him with a gesture. "Ethan, this conversation is with Caroline and Thomas. You can wait for them in the building lobby. They are my grandchildren, and I am their grandmother, and I have the right to speak with them alone, especially after everything that has happened." He wanted to protest, but Caroline, who had always been more mature than her age suggested, placed a hand on his arm. "Dad, it's okay. We need to talk to Grandma." Once Ethan left, I served them cookies and hot chocolate, and we sat in the living room. Caroline, at 14, looked at me with those green eyes so similar to mine, full of confusion and concern. Thomas, 11, seemed more interested in the cookies, but I could tell from his body language that he was also nervous. "Grandma," Caroline began, "is it true that you're taking away our house? Mom has been crying all day, and Dad hasn't left his room." I took a moment to choose the right words. These children deserved honesty, but they also deserved the information to be presented in a way they could understand. "Caroline, Thomas, do you know where the money comes from that pays for your house, your school, your vacations, your clothes?" Thomas shrugged. "From Mom and Dad, I guess." "No, my love, it comes from me. For 15 years, I have paid for everything in your house. The house is in my name. The bills are paid by me. Even the food you eat every day is bought by me with my money." Caroline looked at me with wide eyes. "Seriously? Dad doesn't work?" "Your dad says he has a business, but that business has never produced enough money to support the family. And your mom doesn't work either." "But then why do they always say they don't have money for things we want?" Thomas asked with genuine confusion. "Because it's easier to say there's no money than to explain that the money isn't theirs. It's mine." Caroline, who had always been the more intuitive of the two, began to connect the dots. "That's why whenever we want something expensive, Mom says, 'Ask Grandma,' or 'See if Grandma can help us.'" "Exactly. But Grandma," Caroline continued, "if you pay for everything, why does Mom always talk as if we're asking you for favors?" That question broke my heart because it showed that my 14-year-old granddaughter had already begun to notice the toxic dynamics in her home. "Because your mom doesn't want you to know the truth. It's easier for you to think that I'm the generous grandma who helps out once in a while, instead of admitting that you live completely off my money." Thomas stopped chewing his cookie. "Does that mean we're poor?" "It means that your parents have chosen not to work because they know I'm going to pay for everything, but that situation ended last night." "What happened last night?" Caroline asked. I explained in age-appropriate words what had happened during dinner. I told them about Brittany's toast, how I had felt humiliated after years of supporting them, and about my decision to finally set boundaries. "So, we have to move?" Thomas asked in a small voice. "Your parents have to find a way to support themselves, and you." "Yes, but that doesn't mean you're going to disappear from my life. You are my grandchildren, and I love you more than anything in the world." "But you're not going to help us with money anymore?" Caroline asked. "I'm going to help you in different ways. I'm going to make sure you have what you really need, but I'm no longer going to pay for the luxurious lifestyle your parents have become accustomed to. And I'm going to do something more important. I'm going to teach you the value of work and respect." Caroline nodded slowly. "I think I understand. Mom says mean things about you sometimes, and I've always felt uncomfortable, but never knew why." "What kind of things does she say?" "She says you're controlling, that you use your money to manipulate us. that you like us to depend on you because you don't have a life of your own." The pain of hearing those words from my granddaughter's mouth was indescribable, but it was also liberating. I finally had confirmation of what I had suspected for years. "Caroline Thomas," I said after processing what my granddaughter had just revealed, "I want you to understand something very important. What I am doing is not to hurt you. It's to teach you something your parents have never shown you. That respect is not negotiable, and that true love cannot be bought." Thomas, who had been playing with his cookie crumbs, looked at me with those dark eyes so similar to Ethan's when he was a child. "But where are we going to live, Grandma? All my friends are at my school. Your dad and Mom are going to have to find jobs and look for a house they can afford with their own money. And yes, it's possible that you'll have to change schools to a public one and that you won't be able to have all the expensive things you're used to." "Is that bad?" Caroline asked with genuine curiosity. "No, my love. Millions of children go to public schools and are happy. Millions of families live on tight budgets and learn to value what they have. What's bad is growing up thinking that money appears magically without understanding that someone has to work very hard to earn it." Caroline reflected for a moment. "I guess I'd never thought about that. Whenever I want something, I just ask Mom. And if she says there's no money, we ask you. And how do you think that makes me feel?" Thomas frowned. "Like an ATM." My 11-year-old grandson's honesty surprised me. "Exactly, like an ATM, Thomas." "That must be horrible," Caroline murmured. "I hate it when my friends only seek me out when they need to borrow money for lunch." "Now imagine that happening for 15 years, and that instead of school friends, it was your own family." The two children remained silent, processing what I had just told them. I could see in their expressions that they were understanding the situation from a completely new perspective. "Grandma," Caroline finally said, "can I ask you something? Did you work to earn all that money?" "I worked very hard, Caroline. After your Grandpa Robert died, I had to keep the construction business we had built together going. I worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. I got up at 5 in the morning to review projects before the workers arrived and went to bed after midnight doing the accounting." "And Dad helped you?" "Your dad was 18 when your grandpa died. I offered him to come work with me so he could learn the business and someday inherit it, but he preferred to go out with his friends and party." Thomas looked at me with curiosity. "Dad never worked with you?" I tried to teach him several times, but every time I gave him responsibilities, he found excuses not to fulfill them. He said construction work was too hard, that he had other plans, that he would find his own way. "And did he find it?" Caroline asked, with a maturity that broke my heart. "What do you think, my love? After 15 years of marriage, have you ever seen your dad bring money home?" Caroline slowly shook her head. "Never. Whenever we need something, Mom says, 'Let's ask Grandma,' or 'See if Grandma can help us.' But that doesn't mean your dad can't work. It means he has chosen not to because he knows I will always be there to solve the financial problems." "And Mom?" Thomas asked. "Your mom is an intelligent and capable woman. She speaks 3 languages. She has a business administration degree, and before marrying your dad, she worked at a marketing company. But since they got married, she decided it was easier to live off my money than to use her own skills." The children exchanged glances that contained a deeper understanding than they should have at their age. It was sad that they had to learn these truths this way, but it was also necessary. "Grandma," Caroline said after a long silence, "we've been unfair to you too." Her question surprised me with its honesty and maturity. "You are children, Caroline. It's not your responsibility to understand adult financial dynamics, but you can learn from this situation. What can we learn?" "You can learn that everything in life has a cost, and someone always has to pay that cost. You can learn that money doesn't appear magically, but requires work and effort. And you can learn that respect is the foundation of any relationship, even among family." Thomas raised his hand as if in class. "I want to learn to work. I can help you at your company, Grandma." His offer deeply touched me. You're too young to work in construction, Thomas, but you can start with simple things. You can learn to manage your allowance money. You can help with household chores to earn extra money. You can start to understand that valuable things require effort. And me? Caroline asked. I'm already 14. You can get a part-time job on weekends. You can babysit, help neighbors with their shopping, work at a store, and you can start saving your own money for the things you want. But that means you're never going to help us again? Thomas asked with concern. It means I'm going to help you in different ways. Instead of giving you everything you want without effort, I'm going to teach you how to get it yourselves. Instead of paying for whims, I'm going to make sure you have what you really need. And instead of allowing your parents to use you as an excuse not to work, I'm going to show you that it's possible to be a responsible and hard-working family. Caroline nodded thoughtfully. I think that sounds better, Grandma. I feel bad knowing that you paid for everything while Mom said mean things about you. You feel bad about that? Yes, because it means we've been living a lie. Mom always told us we were a prosperous family, that Dad had a successful business, that we were lucky. But in reality, it was all your money. And how does that make you feel to know that? Ashamed, Caroline admitted, and also angry because if I had known the truth, I would have been more grateful to you. I would have said thank you every time you paid for something instead of taking it for granted. Thomas nodded vigorously. Yes, like when we went to Disney World last year. Mom told us she had saved money for a long time for that trip, but in reality you paid for everything, right? I paid for the flight, the hotel, the park tickets, the food, the souvenirs, everything. It was $8,000 in total. $8,000! Thomas exclaimed. That's a lot of money. Why did Mom lie to us? Because it was easier for you to see her as the generous mom who gave you amazing vacations instead of admitting that she hadn't contributed a single cent to the trip. That's lying, Caroline said with indignation. I hate that they lied to us for so long. Your mom didn't lie to you with the intention of hurting you, I explained, although internally I wasn't sure that was true. But she did hide important information that would have helped you better understand your family situation. What's going to happen now? Thomas asked. Now your parents are going to have to learn to be responsible adults. They're going to have to find jobs. They're going to have to move to a place they can afford. And they're going to have to raise 2 incredible children with their own resources. And what if they can't do it? Of course they can do it, Caroline. Your mom and dad are intelligent and capable people. They've simply chosen the easy path for too long, but when there's no easy path available, they'll find a way to survive and thrive. Do you think they'll be angry with us for this conversation? Thomas asked with concern. They'll probably be upset at first, but you haven't done anything wrong. You've only heard the truth about your family situation, and that truth will help you make better decisions in the future. After Carolyn and Thomas left that afternoon, I sat in my living room reflecting on the conversation we had just had. Seeing the gradual understanding in their eyes, observing how they processed the reality of their family situation, had filled me with a mixture of sadness and hope. Sadness, because they had had to learn painful truths at such a young age, but hope, because finally someone in that family was beginning to understand the value of work and respect. My phone rang around 8 o'clock at night. It was an unknown number, but I decided to answer. Rosalia, I heard a woman's voice that I didn't immediately recognize. Who is this? It's Brittany. I'm calling from my neighbor's phone because you cut off our lines. Ah, Brittany, I replied with a calm that I knew would frustrate her. How can I help you? How can you help me? She repeated incredulously. Rosalia, you just destroyed your own family's life. Do you realize what you've done? I realize perfectly. I have stopped funding the lifestyle of 2 perfectly capable adults who have chosen not to work for 15 years. You can't do this. The children don't deserve this. You're right. The children didn't deserve to grow up in a house full of lies, where they were taught that money appears magically and that disrespecting the person who pays for everything is acceptable. I never disrespected you. Brittany, last night you told me in front of guests that I would never be a real mother. After 15 years of paying every one of your bills, every one of your whims, every one of your invented emergencies. There was a silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her agitated breathing. I was drunk, she finally murmured. I didn't mean that. Of course you meant that. You've been thinking it for years, and last night you finally had the courage to say it out loud. My only regret is that it took me so long to truly listen to you. Please, Rosalia, can we fix this? Can I apologize? I can change. Apologize. Change, I repeated with a bitter laugh. Brittany, you're not apologizing for what you said. You're apologizing because the easy money is gone. If my credit cards were still working, this conversation would never have happened. That's not true. It's completely true. Tell me, Brittany, when was the last time you called me just to ask how I was? When was the last time you invited me to lunch without having some financial emergency to discuss? Another long silence. That's what I thought, I continued. To you, I've never been family. I've been an ATM with feelings. And last night, you made it very clear that you don't even respect those feelings. The children need you, she said in a broken voice. The children are going to have me, but they're no longer going to have the grandmother who pays for everything without receiving respect in return. They're going to have the grandmother who loves them enough to teach them real values. And what are we supposed to do? Ethan hasn't worked in years. I don't have recent work experience. Brittany, you are 37 years old, have a university degree, and speak 3 languages. Ethan is 39, is perfectly healthy, and grew up in a family of builders. You're not going to do anything that millions of people don't do every day. Work to support yourselves. But we can't maintain this lifestyle with normal jobs. Exactly. You're going to have to learn to live within your real means, like everyone else. This is cruel, Rosalia. You're punishing the whole family for something I said when I was drunk. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm stopping being complicit in an unsustainable situation. For 15 years, I've allowed you to live beyond your means using my money. And for 15 years, you've shown less and less respect towards me. That's not true. No, Brittany. Do you know how much money I've spent on your family in the last 15 years? No, I don't know exactly. $422,000. That amount doesn't include birthday and Christmas gifts, vacations, or emergency medical expenses. It only includes basic monthly expenses. I heard a choked whimper on the other end of the line. And do you know how many times in those 15 years you've invited me to dinner to thank me? How many times have you organized something special for me, paid for with your own money? You, us. 0 times, Brittany. Not a single time. Every dinner, every celebration, every gift I've received from you has been indirectly paid for with my own money. I didn't know you were keeping track of all that. I wasn't keeping track until last night. Last night, I sat down and reviewed all my bank records, and for the first time in 15 years, I saw the complete reality of what had been happening. Rosalia, please, give me one more chance. I can change. We can change. One more chance. Brittany, you've had 15 years of opportunities, 15 years to show genuine gratitude, to try to contribute financially to your family, to show me the basic respect that anyone deserves, especially someone who has sacrificed so much for you. What do I have to do? Kneel? Beg you? That's what you want. What I want is impossible, Brittany. I want to get back 15 years of my life. I want to get back the respect I lost from my own son for allowing you to treat me the way you did. I want to get back the dignity I sacrificed every time I pretended that your insults disguised as jokes were acceptable. Never insulted you. No? What did you say to me every time I arrived at a family gathering? Here comes the savior. What would we do without generous Rosalia? Luckily, we have someone who can solve our lives. Those were compliments. They were cruel sarcasms, and you know it. Every one of those comments was a way of reminding me that you saw me as the pathetic relative who needed to buy love because she had no life of her own. I never thought that. Brittany, last night you said exactly that in front of a group of strangers. You said I would never be a real mother. Do you know what that means to a woman who lost her husband at 49 and dedicated the next 20 years of her life to caring for her family? I heard sobs on the other end of the line. It means, I continued, that after 2 decades of sacrifices, my own daughter-in-law considers that everything I have done is worthless because I didn't give birth to my grandchildren. I didn't mean that. Of course you meant that. And you know what, Brittany? You're right. I'm never going to be their biological mother. But it's also true that their biological mother is never going to be able to give them what I have given them: financial stability, quality education, opportunities, and above all, the example of what it means to work hard for what you want. Please, Rosalia, the children are asking me what's going to happen. I don't know what to tell them. Tell them the truth, Brittany. For the first time in their lives, tell them the whole truth about their financial situation. Explain that they're going to have to move because you never paid for the house they live in. Explain that they're going to have to change their lifestyle because you never worked to maintain it. That's going to traumatize them. Do you know what really traumatizes children? Growing up in a house full of lies? Growing up thinking that money appears magically? Growing up without understanding the value of work and effort? That is real trauma, Brittany. I can't do this alone. You won't be alone. You'll be with Ethan, your husband, remember? That man you married for better or for worse. It's time for you to discover what for worse really means. After hanging up with Brittany, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my terrace contemplating the city that spread out before me. The lights began to come on as the sun set, and for the first time in years, that view didn't remind me of the responsibilities I had to carry the next day. There were no other people's bills waiting for me. No invented emergencies to solve, no desperate calls to answer. It was simply beautiful. My phone vibrated with a message from Caroline. Grandma, I talked to Thomas, and we want you to know that we understand what happened. We also want to ask if we can visit you on Saturday, alone without Mom and Dad. We want to get to know the real Grandma, not just the one who paid for everything. Her words touched me so much that my eyes filled with tears. After all the toxicity of the last few days, reading those lines reminded me why what I was doing was worth it. I replied immediately, "Of course, my loves. I'll expect you on Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning. We'll have breakfast together, and then I'll tell you stories about your Grandpa Robert that you've never heard." That night, I slept deeply for the second consecutive time, something that hadn't happened to me in years. On Friday morning, Greg called me with interesting news. "Rosalia, Ethan came to my office yesterday afternoon. He wants to negotiate the terms of the eviction." "Oh? And what does he propose?" "He's willing to get a job if you give them 6 more months in the house and temporarily reinstate the credit cards." I burst out laughing. "Greg, do you realize what just happened? My 39-year-old son is negotiating getting a job as if he's doing us a favor." "Yes, I realize the irony. What do you want me to tell him?" "Tell him the offer is interesting, but he needs to prove he's serious before I consider any kind of extension." "What kind of proof?" "That he has a confirmed job and has received his first paycheck before the 30 days of eviction are up. If by day 29 he has a real job and can show me a pay stub, I'll consider giving them 30 additional days to get organized, but the credit cards remain canceled indefinitely." "Perfect. I also have other news. I reviewed all the financial commitments they might have acquired using your name as a reference. I found 3 department store credit cards you never knew existed." "What?" "Apparently, Brittany applied for cards at Nordstrom, Macy's, and Saks Fifth Avenue using your financial information as backing. The debts total approximately $50,000. I felt as if I had been slapped. Is that legal?" "Technically, it's fraud, but since they are members of your family and you've been paying all their other bills, it would probably be difficult to prosecute them criminally. However, you can dispute the debts and have the cards canceled immediately." "Do it. And Greg, I want you to investigate if there's anything else we don't know. If they've been using my credit information without my knowledge, I need to know everything." After hanging up with Greg, I sat at my desk to process this new information. Not only had they been living off my generosity for 15 years, they had been committing financial fraud using my identity. The betrayal was even deeper than I had imagined. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in decades. I called my old friend Isabel Miller, a woman I had known in college and with whom I had lost contact when I became immersed in the intensive parenting of my parasitic family. "Rosalia?" she answered with evident surprise. My goodness, how many years has it been? 10? 15? Too many years, Isabel. I've been living in a bubble, and I finally woke up. I told her the whole story, including the most recent discovery about the credit fraud. Isabel listened in silence, occasionally murmuring expressions of disbelief. "Rosalia," she said when I finished, "do you realize that what you've just described to me isn't a dysfunctional family? It's full-blown financial abuse." "Financial abuse?" "Yes. When someone manipulates you emotionally to access your economic resources, when they use your generosity as a tool of control, when they commit fraud using your identity, that's not family love, it's abuse." Her words impacted me because they gave a name to something I had been feeling but hadn't been able to articulate. For 15 years, I hadn't been the generous matriarch of a close-knit family. I had been a victim of systematic financial abuse. "And do you know what's most insidious about financial abuse?" Isabel continued. "That the victim always feels guilty for defending themselves. They make you believe you're selfish for wanting boundaries, that you're cruel for protecting your resources, that you're a bad person for not allowing yourself to be exploited indefinitely." "Is exactly how I felt all week," I admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm being too hard on them." "Rosalia, listen to me closely. A mother who supports her adult son for a year while he looks for a job is being generous. A mother who supports her adult son for 5 years while he finds his way is being complacent. A mother who supports her adult son for 15 years while he lives in luxury without working is being abused." Her words were like a flash of clarity. Finally, someone had put into perspective what had really been happening all these years. "Isabel, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "During all these years that we lost contact, did you ever wonder why I had disappeared from your life?" "Honestly, yes. I used to wonder what had happened to you. Before you were so independent, so sure of yourself. You had plans, ambitions, an active social life, and suddenly, when I tried to invite you to things, you always had some family responsibility to attend to. And what did you think? I thought you had become one of those mothers who completely lose their identity in their children. But now I understand that it wasn't that. You had fallen into an abusive relationship with your own family." That afternoon, for the first time in 15 years, I made social plans that had nothing to do with my family. Isabel invited me to accompany her to an art exhibition the following Friday, and I accepted without having to consult with anyone, without having to worry about whether some family emergency would arise, without having to pretend interest in Brittany's manufactured dramas. On Saturday morning, Caroline and Thomas arrived promptly at 10 o'clock. I greeted them with a full breakfast: pancakes, scrambled eggs, bacon, fresh orange juice, and strawberries with cream. But the most important thing was that for the first time in years, I was able to enjoy a meal with my grandchildren without having to listen to their parents complain about money in the background. "Grandma," Caroline said as she cut her pancakes, "I wanted to tell you something. Last night I heard Mom talking on the phone with her sister, and she was saying that you had gone crazy, that you were being cruel for no reason. And what do you think about that?" "I think Mom doesn't understand what it means to be grateful. Since we talked the other day, Thomas and I have been talking a lot about everything you told us." Thomas nodded vigorously, and we realized that we had never said thank you for anything. "How do you feel realizing that?" "Bad," admitted Carolyn, "but we also decided that we want to change that. We want to learn to be truly grateful, not just when we need something. And we also want to learn to work," Thomas added with enthusiasm. "Caroline told me that she's going to look for a babysitting job, and I want to help the neighbor next door with her groceries." I looked at them both with genuine pride. In a single honest conversation, they had shown more emotional maturity than their parents in 15 years. "You know what?" I told them. "I think you're going to be fine, no matter what happens with your parents." "You think so?" Caroline asked. "I'm sure, because you've learned something your parents never learned. That valuable things require effort, and that respect is earned with actions, not with words." 3 months later, I found myself sitting on the terrace of a small cafe in Florence, Italy, contemplating the Arno River as the afternoon sun painted the ancient buildings with golden hues. In front of me was a perfect cappuccino and a book of poetry I had wanted to read for years. For the first time in decades, my time belonged completely to me. The trip to Europe had been a spontaneous decision. After selling the construction company that Robert and I had built together, I realized that I had more money than I would need for the rest of my life. But more importantly, I had something I hadn't had in years: the freedom to decide how to spend it. My phone vibrated with a message from Caroline. "Grandma, I got my second job. Now I babysit 3 afternoons a week and help at the local bookstore on Saturdays. I've saved $200 this month. Thomas is also working with Mr. Davis mowing lawns. Dad finally got a job at a construction company, and Mom is working part-time at a translation office. It's weird, but I think we're happier now than when we had everything given to us." Her message filled me with deep satisfaction. I had made the right decision, even if it had been the most difficult one of my life. Ethan had called me 2 weeks ago for the first time in 2 months. His voice sounded different, more mature, less childish. "Mom," he had said, "I want you to know that I got a job at Rivera Construction. I started as a basic laborer, but the foreman says I have potential to move up if I work hard." "I'm glad to hear that, son. I also want to apologize. Not for what's happening now, but for all the previous years. You're right. I'm a 39-year-old man who never learned to be responsible because I always knew you would solve everything. And how do you feel now that you have to solve things yourself?" "Terrified," he admitted with a nervous laugh. "But also, I don't know how to explain it. Proud, I guess. When I received my first paycheck, I understood something I had never felt before. That money was mine. I had earned it with my own effort. And Brittany is struggling more than me. She's still angry with you. She still thinks you were too harsh, but she's working, and the children respect her more now that they see her making an effort. I'm glad to hear that the whole family is working." "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you ever going to completely forgive us? Is there any chance we can be a normal family again?" I had reflected carefully before replying. "Ethan, forgiveness isn't something that's granted once and for all. It's something that's built day by day with consistent actions and genuine respect. If you continue to show that you've learned your lesson, if you continue to treat me with the respect I deserve, and if you continue to be responsible for your own lives, then yes, we can rebuild our relationship, but you're never going to help us financially again. I'm going to help you in different ways. If the grandchildren need something for their education, if there's a real medical emergency, if you show that you've been saving and working hard towards a specific goal, then I'll consider contributing, but I will never again support capable adults who choose not to support themselves." Now, sitting in that Italian cafe, I remembered that conversation with a smile. 90 days had passed since I cut off all funding, and my family had not only survived, but was thriving in ways that never would have been possible while they lived off my money. Greg had sent me a report the previous week. Ethan had already received 3 raises in 2 months for his work ethic. Brittany had been promoted to coordinator at the translation office. The children were adapting well to their new public school, where Caroline had been elected class representative, and Thomas had joined the soccer team. More importantly, they had learned to live within a budget. They had sold Brittany's luxury car and bought a used but reliable one. They had moved into a 2-bedroom apartment that, although smaller than my house, was cozy and paid for with their own money. They had learned to cook at home instead of eating at expensive restaurants, and had discovered that some of the best family experiences didn't require money. Walks in the park, game nights at home, homemade meals prepared together. Caroline had told me in one of our weekly calls, "Grandma, it's strange, but I think I understand better now what it means to be a family. Before, when we had everything we wanted, we never appreciated anything. Now, when we buy something special, like pizza on Friday night, it feels like a real celebration." That transformation confirmed that I had made the right decision. My grandchildren were learning values that would stay with them throughout their lives. The value of work, the satisfaction of their own effort, the importance of gratitude, and the difference between wants and needs. As for me, these 3 months had been revealing in ways I never expected. I had rediscovered who I was when I wasn't defined by my financial utility to others. I had reconnected with old friends, explored hobbies I had abandoned decades ago, and traveled to places I had dreamed of visiting. But more importantly, I had regained my dignity. That afternoon in Florence, as the sun set over the river, I called Isabel. "How's your European adventure going?" she asked with evident joy in her voice. "It's been transformative, but Isabel, I think I'm ready to come home." "Are you tired of beautiful Italy?" "No, quite the opposite. I feel so good about myself that I no longer need to be running away from my old life. I'm ready to build a new life at home, a life where I am the protagonist, not just the financier of others' lives. And your family? They'll be fine. In fact, they're better than they've been in years. And when I return, I'm going to have a different relationship with them, one based on mutual respect and genuine love, not economic dependence." That night, in my hotel overlooking Florence Cathedral, I wrote in my personal diary for the first time in decades. Today, I turned 70 in the most beautiful city in the world. But the most beautiful things aren't the works of art I've seen or the breathtaking landscapes. The most beautiful thing is the feeling of having regained my life. For 15 years, I became a shadow of who I had been, living solely to be useful to others who didn't value me. I believed I was being a good mother and grandmother, but in reality, I was being a bad life teacher. Now my grandchildren call me to tell me about their work achievements, not to ask me for money. My son speaks to me with respect because he has learned that respect is earned. My daughter-in-law is beginning to understand that true motherhood isn't about getting others to pay for your children, but about teaching them to be responsible people. And for the first time in decades, I am free. It's not revenge I've found. It's liberation. It's not cruelty I practiced. It's tough love, the kind of love that sometimes requires saying no to teach important lessons. Tomorrow I return home, but I don't return as the same woman who left 3 months ago. I return as Rosalia Jenkins, successful businesswoman, independent woman, loving but firm grandmother, and above all, a person who no longer needs to buy anyone's love, because I have learned the most important lesson of all. The love you have to buy isn't worth what it costs. I closed the diary and looked out my hotel window one last time. Tomorrow, the journey back would begin, but I was no longer the same woman who had fled a humiliating dinner 3 months ago. I had found something more valuable than all the money I had spent in 15 years of misguided generosity. I had found my dignity, and this time, no one was going to take it from me. Did you like my story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.